Start recording as soon as we get some clear sound.
Okay. My name is Jeff Kilgore. I'm a resident of Glenn County, Georgia, and a native Georgian. Have spent my better part of my life growing up in Glenn County in Brunswick, Georgia. And I have been fairly involved politically over the past few years, particularly given the political turmoil that our country's in, and specifically in the state of Georgia. As many of the viewers may know, there is an issue on the ballot July 31st called TSPLOST, or Transportation Investment Act. It's the result of a bill that was passed in 2010 in the 2010 session of the General Assembly in the state of Georgia, after 3 years of acrimonious debate and infighting politically within both the Republican and the Democrat parties. The TIA was attempted in 2007, 2008, and 2009, and it failed all 3 years. And the reason is because it's bad law. The bill that passed in 2010 was the result of a compromise between the Democrats and the leadership in the Republican Party. And unfortunately, it has resulted in something that's very detrimental to the state of Georgia and very detrimental to all Georgians individually. The General Assembly had struggled with the governor of the state of Georgia, which at that time was Sonny Perdue, and the Speaker of the House at that time was a gentleman by the name of Glenn Richardson. They both wanted to control the Department of Transportation. The reason being is because the Department of Transportation is the largest state agency with a budget annually of something north of $2.5 billion a year. The leaders in the state of Georgia protected DOT constitutionally going back to a 1983 rewrite of the state constitution. And as a result, the Department of Transportation is not subject to review or oversight by either the General Assembly or by the governor. And given that it's the largest agency and spends the most money, you might imagine that the politicians would want to control that source of revenue or that source of power. The infighting and the struggles between the governor and the General Assembly culminated in this compromise called the Transportation Investment Act in 2010. The law also was intended to address the transportation issues and the traffic gridlock in the city of Atlanta. The Atlanta Regional Commission has for years bemoaned the fact that they weren't adequately funded in order to provide the improvement to the roads to relieve the traffic congestion. As the viewer is probably aware, the metropolitan Atlanta area is one of the most spread out metropolitan areas in the world. It has what's called sprawl, and it is not concentrated. Therefore, it's not conducive to rapid transit or mass transit. The fact is that the ridership on MARTA over the years has been declining. It's now at 5% of the population in the metropolitan Atlanta area. And unfortunately, when they devised TSPLOST, the 52% of the spending in the metropolitan Atlanta area will be devoted to mass transit. Therefore, 52% of the spending does not solve the traffic issues. It's not going to be spent on highways, it's going to be spent on rapid rail. The MARTA is underfunded. It requires operating subsidies. It's the most inefficient form of transportation for the taxpayer, and MARTA has a huge operating deficit currently, and they have no solution as to how to continue to fund MARTA. Therefore, they had to have an alternate source of revenue, and that's what TSPLOST is going to accomplish. The advocates for TSPLOST will maintain that the money is not going to go to metropolitan Atlanta, but the very simple fact is that the State Department of Transportation, with $2.5 billion a year in revenue from various sources, both the state fuel tax, federal government, toll roads, etc., that money is going to be freed up if TSPLOST passes in all 12 regions. all of the regions will be funding their projects internally within each separate region. Therefore, the $2.5 billion that used to go to DOT and that used to be devoted to paying for roads and bridges in the state of Georgia will be available to be redirected. If you go to the DOT website, they admit that in the question and answer session. TSPLOST is a disaster for all 12 regions. The projects are chronically underfunded. The entire premise of TSPLOST is that the state of Georgia will continue to receive federal money, and as everyone knows, the federal government has been borrowing 40 cents for every dollar that's spent. Therefore, there is no continuing source of revenue from the Highway Trust Fund, which in fact has been insolvent since 2008 and has borrowed over $40 billion from the general fund of the federal treasury. So there is no bailout for DOT. There is no solution to close the funding gap for TSPLOST. The result is, if this passes in any region, you're going to have projects that have been promised that will not be completed, and the traffic will not be relieved, and what you will be saddled with is a 1% tax, which is really an 18% tax increase on your sales tax, and you'll never get rid of it because many of the projects are bus systems. For example, in our region, the coastal region, Long County will get a bus system that will cost $25 million for a county that only has 14,000 people. There will have to be a funding source for that system after the 10 years the TSPLOST is over. The fact is that there is a solution, there is a way to fund the roads and bridges we need. I, along with all of the other opponents of TSPLOST, believe strongly that we need to have a world-class transportation system in the state of Georgia. Indeed, we are ranked number 7 in the entire United States today, and we do have adequate roads. We must maintain them, and we must plan for the future. But TSPLOST is not the answer, and I encourage you to go to the website, Stop TSPLOST Region 12.org, and you'll learn more than you know now, I promise you. And if you have questions, please respond on the website and we will get back to you immediately. Thank you.
Okay, we're clear.